real crimes on their behalf. That is where we start the hour. Some of our favorite experts and friends. Former top official at the Department of Justice and MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman's here. Also joining us, writer and editor for Protect Democracy, Amanda Carpenter's here, and the president of Media Matters for America, Angelo Carusone, is here. Angelo, anyone who read through, as I know you did over the summer, and Andrew, I know you did too, the FBI section, Project 2025, knows that the reception of Kash Patel in Republican circles, it would be more surprising if he was not well received, that the plans for the FBI and the pages of Project 2025 are some of the most radical and some of the most explicit.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, he has really internalized the narrative that there's a deep state, and at the center of that deep state is the FBI. That is an instrument of revenge and investigations. And so it needs to be, you need to go in there and first break it. And then the second part, which I think, there's a lot of focus on this idea that he's going to break it, and that's part of the intention. But the second part is what you alluded to when you referenced Project 2025, which is that after you break it, when you reconstitute it, what do you turn it into? And you turn it into an instrument of political revenge and power. And that's ultimately what Kash Patel is sort of an avatar for, is that sort of worldview. And the part about it that I find so disturbing that oftentimes gets lost because of, there's so much discussion about what he represents and what he's going to do, is that there's another ingredient to Patel beyond his worldview. And that's that he's so internalized the narrative that he also believes the ends justify the means, meaning he believes so much of the right wing's deep state narrative over the past 8 years that he's, at least based on his own discussions, that he's willing to break rules, bend rules, do things that are totally out of bounds, because that's necessary in this moment to restore justice. And that's the part that's so troubling to me, because there's this plan, and then he also then has the will and the rationale for how you go ahead and implement and execute that plan.
I mean, Amanda, that I think articulated is what would happen. But I think taking half a step back and marinating in the why. I mean, after 9/11, George W. Bush, Robert Mueller was, I think, 6 days on the job when 9/11 happened. And it was Robert Mueller's mission to never again fail to connect the dots and to sync up with the CIA and protect the homeland from any further terrorist attack. And the FBI was viewed as being on the front line and had bipartisan support largely, but was held up as a model of sort of walking the line and protecting the country and being aggressive and tough. Republicans supported the FBI, and they supported Robert Mueller's leadership of the FBI. The demonization of the Mueller probe is the first symptom of how that worm had turned. And I think there are a lot of things that explain how radicalized the Republicans have become against an agency that constitutionally is very conservative, small c conservative, not Republican conservative. It's not political, but it is. Its ideals and values and mission are very conservative. But there has been a complete vacuum. No Republican defended Jim Comey when he was fired by Trump. No Republican defended Andy McCabe, even though the alleged transgression had nothing to do with domestic politics, and the whole smear campaign against him was a fabrication. He was never a figure of the left. Everyone that the right has come after has either been completely nonpartisan, or if there's any political leaning to be deduced from their careers, they lean right. What is this really about? Oh, you're on mute, Amanda. You got to stop and start over.
No, sorry. You mentioned 9/11, and my brain kind of went into overdrive there, because I think we need to think about what is the purpose and mission of the FBI. And that is to prevent terrorism, prevent things like cybercrime, and prevent malign foreign influences in this nation. And you talk about the mission that the FBI has heroically performed in the days after 9/11 and through that to protect this nation. And aside from asking what Kash Patel would affirmatively do that is in contrary with our democratic values and going after political enemies, I think you have to ask about what won't be done at the FBI in that scenario, right? Once the focus shifts. Kash Patel, as you mentioned, you put up the enemies list. He describes people like Sarah Edgar Flores, who I worked with in the past, along with people like Liz Cheney, as the greatest threat to democracy. That is an absurd, untrue statement. To compare, to even put those people on any kind of list as a threat to this nation in comparison to what the FBI should be focusing on and doing is such an abject lack of focus on the true purpose of that job. And listen, like, let's be real. We live in a dangerous world right now, right? There's all kinds of things happening. There are people who are watching our officials closely. And if he does go through with his intended promise to dismantle the FBI, just at a base practical level, what does that mean? And what kind of national security vacuum will exist in that kind of environment? These are the kind of questions. I know Republican senators on the Hill are reluctant to oppose this nomination. I think there's maybe too much focus caught up in the fact that he's a loyalist, and maybe we should start really zeroing in these practical questions of what happens when the FBI takes its focus on real threats to this nation and decides that people on that list are more deserving of attention.
I mean, Andrew Weissman, this is your expertise. This is part of your extraordinary resume. What does it mean to have someone like Kash Patel run the FBI?
I think it's part of a sort of anti-law sort of regime that we're going into. It bears remembering that you start with Donald Trump. He is a convicted felon. He does not like the FBI because the FBI was, along with their bosses at the Department of Justice, part of the group that brought criminal cases against him, and that he fought mightily to never have go to trial. The one case that went to trial, he was convicted. The other three, he successfully delayed. And so if he's running on a very anti-rule of law platform, and he is going to, I think, do that now when he becomes president on January 20th, and Kash Patel is part of that. And I think for all of this sort of breaking down of the FBI, I think what he's really going to be doing is just turning it from an agency that they claim with no evidence at all was weaponized against Donald Trump, when in fact all of the courts that addressed that claim rejected it and said this was not selective prosecution, that there were facts here. The one jury that was allowed to hear it convicted beyond a reasonable doubt unanimously. You know, that is what's sort of going on here, that is a sort of anti-rule of law regime that I think is going to result in Kash Patel trying to run the FBI in that way. And we are a far cry from the likes of Louis Freeh and Robert Mueller and even James Comey, who all were qualified. And to me, the one thing I would say to Senate Republicans looking at this is, as your other guests have noted, is this is no time for someone to learn on the job, even if they had the right mindset and were fact-based and law-based. This is somebody who simply does not have the depth of knowledge and experience that you want in that position.
I mean, can we go back another half a step, though? What is the, I mean, Angelo, the pledge to root out the corruption atop an agency led by Chris Christie's former defense attorney and Donald Trump's handpicked replacement for Jim Comey, it means what? To root out, who are we rooting out and getting rid of? It's been run by a series of Republican men. I mean, what is the allegation of corruption rooted in?
I mean, it starts all the way back to 2017, and really, you know, this idea of a deep state, it had been percolating in the far-right fever swamps, but really Fox News kind of plucked it and turned it into a narrative that actually now, as you noted when you were talking earlier, is sort of just an accepted norm in the halls of the Senate. 8 years ago, that was like a weird, random, radical thing. Yeah, people talked about it, got some online attention. But then Hannity sort of picked it up, Fox News did, and then Tucker Carlson really refined it. And when you actually look at what the ingredients of that are, it gets to the answer to your question, which is who are they really referring to? What they're really referring to is basically anyone that was doing their job in a vacuum and focused on the job itself. So the norms, the rules, the process, the experts. So anyone that really is an expert, anyone that was a part of the status quo and that wasn't aligned with their worldview. And in particular, in practice, what does that mean? It means anyone that put up any kind of resistance to orders or instructions or guidance in the first Trump administration, that because those instructions either were out of bounds or not acceptable or just not a good use of resources. Anyone that was seen as sort of holding the line is exactly what they're referring to. And that's the part that I find so troubling about even this conversation, not this business with it, but the fact that we even have to have it. It's that Trump announced Kash Patel as an appointee as if that's a normal thing. And Christopher Wray resigned instead of being fired as if that's a normal thing. That's not normal. Part of the reason why the term is set to be 10 years is to avoid exactly this even possibility, this very prospect. And so part of what they're trying to do now is get people to self-select, to quit. And Christopher Wray just sort of paved the way. He set an example. So what does it mean? It means anyone, we talked a lot about this over the summer, that in the first Trump administration, there were people directly around Trump that were saying, wait, that's not okay, that's out of bounds, this is how you sort of get closer to an acceptable policy. But there was more than just 5 people at the highest levels that were doing that kind of work. There were people that do that work every single day, regardless of who the president is, that sort of help make things work. And those are the people that they're focused in on. That's why they have a database of 11,000 people where the first level of whether or not you're going to be in or out is your loyalty to the larger MAGA movement, because that's the first qualifier here. Expertise is no longer a valid criterion. It's about loyalty, and it's about sort of smashing the status quo to implement this new worldview. We are in the process of a massive transformative change. And that's what I find so sad and disheartening about the Senate saying, yeah, that it's less actually about how they view Patel, although that's important. It's that they've actually accepted a radical overhaul of what has been a very important part of our justice system, almost overnight.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Rice, and to Angela's point, it's about the dogs that don't bark, right? Christopher Wray leaving at the end of a term is the opposite of what the 10-year term was designed to do. No director is supposed to leave at the end of any president's term. A day or on either side would be, less jarring and inappropriate than what he's going to do, which is to ride out with the current president, because it actually taints his entire career there, tying him to Biden, which is the opposite of what you want to project about an agency. And I believe him when he says he loves the mission and he loves the men and women of the agency. Tying your tenure to the end of the Biden administration suggests you were a part of it. The FBI is never a part of any administration. And I wonder how you undo that damage.
I couldn't agree more that Chris Wray set an example here that is horrendous. Remember, he was appointed by Donald Trump. What you have is a complete difference in models. You have President Biden, who has said, yes, this was the FBI director, whether I like him or not, or whether I think I could have done better by appointing someone else, did not do that because of the institutional concern that the FBI director is supposed to be a 10-year term and is supposed to be above politics. And with Donald Trump, you have the exact